Billionaire exposed for disrespecting black judge, but her unexpected response is transformative. Ava Mitchell took a deep breath as she adjusted her robe, the courtroom buzzing with palpable tension. Today would be different. Today, she would face Carter Blake. The billionaire's name floated around the gallery like a dark cloud, synonymous with notoriety and disdain. As the gavel struck and silence fell, Ava caught the gaze of the audience, eyes hungry for a spectacle. Her stomach tightened, not entirely from the pressures of the case, but from the looming reality of her platform, one that transcended the immediate proceedings. Growing up in a small South Side apartment, with her grandmother's whispered wisdom so woven into her fabric, Ava had built a life predicated on resilience. But now, standing before a man whose wealth and privilege saturated every corner of this courtroom, she wrestled with more than just legal intricacies. She battled her own insecurities. Could she command respect when the deck was stacked against her? Would they ever see her past the color of her skin and her modest beginnings? Or would she always personify the other? As Carter walked in, an air of arrogance wrapped around him like a bespoke suit. He dismissed her with a sly smirk, making thinly veiled remarks that cut deep. Yet she kept her composure. The courtroom held its breath as if it sensed an impending storm. Moments later, Carter's condescension erupted into a viral fiasco, mocking Ava's qualifications. The image of her as the underdog triggered outrage online, loaded with comments that echoed the biases she had faced all her life. How could she rise above words that sought to diminish her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from the channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The pressure mounted like a vice closing in on her chest. Every click, every comment, a reminder of the scrutiny she faced as a black woman in power. Would she fire back with anger? Would she let their venom seep into her demeanor? Ava felt the weight of her community on her shoulders, the hopes of young black girls who looked up to her as proof that dreams could rise from the ashes of systemic hurdles. Yet the lingering doubts clawed at her heart. Imperfections felt magnified in this defining moment. She could feel her grandmother's spirit urging her to stand tall. But did she have the strength to channel that rage into something greater? Carter's eventual public relations disaster mirrored her internal turmoil, his fortune morphing into a curse as he grappled with mounting backlash. Yet as her own initiative blossomed into an answer, creating mentorship opportunities for rising lawyers, Ava felt the consumption of fear tightening. Each decision she made weighed against her desire to ascend in a world that wanted her diminished. In this crucible of despair, each ruling became not only a legal decision, but an indictment of prejudice that ran deeper than any courtroom. As she gathered her thoughts in the stillness of the chambers, Ava faced a harrowing realization. The fight for acknowledgement wasn't just for her, but for her son, her legacy. With her breath hitching in her throat, she knew this wasn't just another trial. It was an opportunity to dismantle walls. But could she turn the tide of adversity into a legacy that inspired? Anxiety clawed at her resolve as the thought settled heavily. The price of justice demanded sacrifice, and she was standing close to its precipice. Would she fly or fall? Ava stood alone in the empty courtroom after the gavel had fallen, the echoes of tension still vibrating in the air. Her mind raced as she replayed the confrontation with Carter Blake. It was no longer just about the case anymore. It had morphed into a deeply personal battle between her dignity and his privilege. Taking a steadying breath, she reminded herself of the weight of her responsibilities, not just as a judge, but as a figure of hope for those who believed in the possibility of change. As she made her way out, Ava resolved to delve deeper into the legal texts that would underpin her ruling. Each case had its narrative, and she needed to weave her own story into every decision she made. The potential for precedent-setting decisions danced tantalizingly close. She could not let it slip away. In the solitude of her chambers, surrounded by shelves of law reports, the books seemed to beckon her. They held more than just texts. They contained the pulse of history and the struggles of countless others. A flicker of determination ignited within her, urging her to reframe the situation not as a liability, but as an opportunity. The idea flickered in her mind like a flame, slowly growing. She decided to reach out to the young lawyers she'd mentored. Energized by the thought of connecting with them again, she opened her laptop. It was time to organize an event, a panel discussion where bright minds could debate and explore the implications of their ongoing case against Blake. Wouldn't this be an act of defiance against his disdain, an affirmation that strength was not measured by wealth, but by conviction? Several emails later, a network of enthusiasm began to take shape. She was met with overwhelming positivity from her mentees, their excited responses sparking the fire within her to fan it even more. This wasn't just a chance for them to learn, it could galvanize community energy toward justice that extended beyond her courtroom. But of course, it came with its own set of risks. Engaging this audience meant she might draw further scrutiny, greater backlash. The thought sent a shudder through her, and she hesitated. Could she weather that storm again? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of the blistering fire of resilience forged through struggles. It was that consistent reminder that tethered Ava to her purpose. She grabbed a pen, scrawling down her thoughts in a frenzy. The idea of integrating her judicial powers with direct engagement could be her way forward, not just a legal strategy, but a personal one. This was her moment to reclaim agency and to turn the narrative around. As the day drifted into night, Ava watched the sun dip beneath the horizon outside her window. It ushered in a sense of clarity, a resolution. Tomorrow would not just bring her next court appearance. It would also ignite discussions that would resonate far beyond the walls of the courthouse. However, a small voice inside whispered the undeniable truth. No matter how prepared she felt, Carter Blake's influence still loomed large. What would his response be to her increasing visibility? The thought marinated in her mind, a storm brewing on the horizon. Would he retaliate with intimidation tactics, or would he understate her mission, frequently attempting to drown her out? The realization landed heavily on her heart. If she was to face him, she would need to prepare not just for the legal fight, but for the emotional and psychological battle ahead. Ava tightened her grip on her pen, looking back at the blank page in front of her, her heart pounding with determination. The moment of truth approached. She resolved to meet it head-on. In that quiet room, filled with fading daylight, a decision crystallized in her mind. She was more than a judge in that courtroom. It was time for the world to see the full extent of her resolve and the brilliance of her vision. But would such courage be enough to withstand the firestorm that Blake would undoubtedly unleash? The weight of her next steps loomed ahead as the courtroom awaited a storm that could shatter the very foundations of her resolve. As dawn broke the next morning, Ava found herself grappling with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The morning sun filtered through her office window, illuminating the legal documents strewn across her desk. Each page was a reminder of the shifting tides in her life, where the mere act of ruling had transformed into a profound stand against a system weighted by privilege and intimidation. In the quiet moments before the courthouse doors would open, she pondered her strategy, Today wasn't just about wearing her robe, it was about crafting an image of strength, ensuring that her voice resonated beyond the confines of the courtroom. She reminded herself that her role transcended the legalese. It spoke to justice, equity, and the relentless spirit of resilience. The panel discussion she had initiated loomed in her mind, a beacon of hope amidst a sea of uncertainty. How could she use this platform to not only articulate her vision, but also embolden those who felt unheard? Taking a deep breath, she looked at herself in the mirror, mentally rehearsing her opening words. She would not shy away from the topics that mattered. She was prepared to confront the uncomfortable truths that society often glossed over. When she arrived at the courthouse, the air was tinged with unease. Murmurs followed her as she made her way through the halls, resonating whispers of disbelief and support alike. Each step felt heavier, yet more liberating. She understood that today would test her resolve against not just Blake's influence, but the systemic forces he represented. In her courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. Opposing counsel sat across from her, eyes narrowed and strategic. The moment Carter Blake entered the room, an unsettling energy seeped into the air. His confident stride exuded entitlement, as if the room was his domain. Ava's heart raced, but she grounded herself in her principles, focusing on the power of her position rather than the threat he posed. As the proceedings began, Ava navigated the case with caution and precision, each question designed to dismantle the facade of credibility Blake had built around himself. She watched him shift uncomfortably under her scrutiny, each challenge aimed directly at the core of his narrative. The stakes had heightened. This was no longer just about legal precedents, but about dismantling an ideology that sought to undermine her authority. Yet for every calculated move, Blake countered adeptly, his responses tinged with condescension, intended to undermine her credibility. The courtroom cracked with the sharp edges of their verbal exchanges, his arrogance colliding with her steadfastness. But each barb he flung only fueled her determination, transforming the conflict into an opportunity to showcase her positional power and to clarify her stance as a judge who would not capitulate to intimidation. As the proceedings drew closer to a pivotal moment, Ava took a breath, feeling the weight of her decision looming larger. The panel discussion was more than a forum for ideas. It was a rallying point for her own empowerment and a wider community yearning for change. Finishing her cross-examination, she turned her gaze toward Blake, who wore a bemused expression. "Your privilege does not grant you immunity from scrutiny, Mr. Blake," she declared, her voice strong and unwavering, echoing through the courtroom. The words landed like a challenge, not just to him, but to anyone present who had ever felt their voice diminished. Questions swirled in her mind. Had she succeeded in shifting the narrative today? Would her boldness lead to repercussions, or would it catalyze a change in perspective? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her, even as newfound hopes began to blossom. The moment was critical. This was when change began, but the battle would not end here. With Blake's glare pinning her, the next act would be even more crucial. Would she confront the looming threat of his retaliation with even greater resolve, or would doubt creep back in? Ava stood steady, prepared to face the storm head-on, resolute in her belief that this was only the beginning. The fight for justice and the re-examination of power had ignited a fire within her, but how long could she sustain it against the inevitable backlash? The thought lingered. Time would unveil the true stakes of her courage and the reality of her situation. A battle was unfolding, but a greater war loomed just ahead. Ava stepped out of the courthouse, the echoes of the trial still reverberating in her mind. The sunlight seemed brighter, almost blinding, as she faced the throngs of reporters waiting outside. The atmosphere outside felt like a cauldron of chaos, a stark contrast to the ominous weight she had just shed in the courtroom. Yet, instead of feeling elated, a storm brewed within her, a fear of the repercussions of her boldness, of the conflict that might be unleashed by her refusal to back down. As she maneuvered through the crowd, the questions swarmed like flies. "What's next for you, Judge?" one reporter called out. "Did Blake shock you?" shouted another. Each question pierced her armor of resolve, but she realized she was not just a judge today, she was a symbol of defiance. Taking a deep breath, she raised her chin, reminding herself that she had a responsibility beyond her profession. "Change starts with truth," she replied, her voice steady. "If we do not confront it, we cannot hope to dismantle the structures that perpetuate inequality." The words came not from rehearsed speeches, but from a place deep within her, a place of revelation and awakening. She felt the warmth of self-empowerment radiate from within, igniting a belief that she could indeed lead the charge for change. The questions that had previously plagued her mind began to shift. How could she leverage the media attention to amplify the messages that were often silenced? Turning her focus inward, she realized she had been gifted a rare opportunity to channel her experiences into action. The panel discussion she had envisioned was not just an afterthought. It was now a necessity. In the days that followed, Ava poured her energy into planning the discussion, her mind a whirlwind of ideas. She envisioned a platform not merely for debate, but for transformative exchange. She engaged with mentors, reaching out to allies who believed in justice and equity, collectively brainstorming on how to empower those who felt invisible. Each conversation, each email, fueled her determination to make the panel a stronghold of ideas that challenged the status quo. Yet uncertainty nagged at her. What if Blake retaliated? What if this spotlight turned into a target on her back? Ava knew she had to confront these fears. She began training herself in resilience strategies, exploring meditation and visualization techniques that grounded her. She would not allow doubt to cloud her vision. She practiced assertive responses, crafting a mental arsenal to use should Blake or his allies attempt to undermine her further. With every passing day, her vision sharpened. This was not simply about one trial or even her career. It was about setting a precedent, about revealing the inequities that trickled through every level of the judiciary. The thought of the panel became a source of excitement, an avenue for necessary dialogue rather than self-preservation. However, the spectre of Blake loomed larger. His insurance against consequence lay in his power and connections. The more she prepared, the more she realized that facing him head-on might not be limited to the courtroom. The battle had now taken root in every aspect of her life. As she finalized the details for the upcoming panel, she found herself at a crossroads. It was time to confront not just the darkness imposed by her adversary, but also the fears that had lived in the shadows of her mind. Ava stood at the edge of something transformative, poised to either embrace it or retreat. Ava had always been a fighter, but the next steps required something more profound than mere tenacity. She had to reconcile her past hesitations with her present resolve, transforming her journey into a narrative of healing and empowerment. But the true test awaited her. The day of the panel approached, and with it a question loomed larger than ever. Could she inspire others to join her in the pursuit of justice, or would she, for a moment longer, be trapped in the confines of her own fears? The reality was closing in, and Ava felt time slipping like sand through her fingers. The time had come to confront not just Blake's power, but her own. Would she break free from her constraints, or let them bind her once more? The answer lay ahead, shrouded in uncertainty, but the stakes had never been clearer. Ava stood in front of the mirror, her reflection revealing a woman teetering between confidence and apprehension. The hair, neatly pulled back, framed her face, but couldn't eliminate the shadows beneath her eyes. The anticipation of the panel discussion pulsed like an electric current throughout her body, urging her to take the next step while simultaneously flooding her thoughts with doubt. Could she assert herself effectively against adversaries whose influence permeated the very fabric of the judicial system? Her phone buzzed sharply, breaking her concentration. A text from one of her mentors flashed on the screen, affirming their shared commitment to confronting institutional injustices. The message dug into her internal conflict. How could she be the change she wanted to see when every social structure seemed intent on maintaining the status quo? The weight of responsibility felt heavier than the robe she wore in court. "This is about more than just you, Ava," she whispered to herself, channeling all the lessons learned during her journey. As she headed to the venue, her determination solidified. Each footstep resonated with purpose, and the thrumming crowd around her began to stoke a fire she thought had dimmed. The sight of the stage sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. Her panel wasn't just a forum, it was a battlefield where words could break chains. Upon entering the crowded auditorium, Ava felt the palpable tension in the air. Reporters jostled for position, their cameras ready to capture the conflict unfolding around her. The thought of Blake's looming presence sent a shiver down her spine, but amid that anxiety, a deeper resolve began to emerge. Would he dare to undermine her, to turn what was supposed to be a haven of dialogue into a personal attack? Seating herself at the table, the usual rush of anxiety failed to materialize. Instead, Ava's mind flooded with reflections of all the voices she'd encountered during her planning. She envisioned the faces of those who had felt oppressed, voiceless, and overshadowed by the titans of industry and power, including Blake. Their courage to speak their truth became her armor. When the audience quieted, she lifted her gaze, scanning the sea of faces, both familiar and unfamiliar. Today, we gather not just to discuss law, but the deeper truths that govern our humanity, she began, the resonance of her voice calming her initial jitters. Each word flowed from a well of conviction, amplifying her mission. The panelists joined her, each representing different aspects of justice, equity, and advocacy. They offered insights that harmonized with Ava's vision. This was more than a discussion, it was an awakening. With each speaker's turn, Ava saw the connections between their experiences and her own. The conversation shifted from defensiveness to an embrace of courage, interspersed with fiery exchanges about bias, personal recounts of prejudice, and the systemic hurdles still standing tall in the face of progress. As the panel delved deeper, questions from the audience emerged, some probing, others combative, but all relatable. Blake's name floated ominously in the air, yet Ava felt a shield of strength envelop her. The more she addressed the queries, the more empowered she felt. She deftly tied her experiences into broader societal issues, shedding light on the inequalities that were all too often overlooked. Yet amid the progress, she could still feel the tension from the shadows, aware that the real challenge was still to come. Would they allow her voice to resonate, or would Blake's influence stifle this moment of connection? Then there it was, a designated moment for audience commentary, where she knew Blake's allies would surely attempt to redirect the conversation. The uncertainty sent a chill through her, but it was no longer debilitating. It sharpened her focus. "Ava," a familiar, authoritative voice boomed from the back of the auditorium, cutting through the optimistic atmosphere. The figure standing there was unmistakable. Blake. The time had come to confront him directly, not just as a judge or a professional, but as a person who had embarked on a journey of profound resilience. What would she say? Would the words she carefully crafted stand against the force of his critique? The repercussions of this confrontation threatened to reshape everything, her future, her beliefs, and the fight for justice she'd embraced. Ava took a deep breath, preparing for the battle ahead. Would she emerge victorious, or would this moment reveal cracks in her newfound resolve? "Blake," Ava began, her voice steady, but the word felt heavy in the air. The audience seemed to inhale collectively, a palpable anticipation hanging between them. The eyes were on her, all waiting for her response. "Your presence here is a testament to the stakes involved," she continued, anchoring herself in the gravity of the moment. She was aware of the cameras focusing intently on her, but her attention was firmly on Blake. This wasn't just about their professional rivalry. It was about the integrity of the system they both navigated. Many of us are here to advocate for justice in a way that honors all voices, especially those often silenced by power. Blake's expression remained inscrutable, a practice mask crafted throughout years in the courtroom and the boardroom. Ava recognized this was his tactic, maintaining the upper hand through intimidation. But today, she resolved not to falter. Instead, the resolve ignited a spark inside her, defiance spilling into her words. "Let's discuss accountability," she said, her stance shifting from reactive to proactive. "To lead is to serve, but too often leaders like you neglect the very communities that sustain them." As she spoke, she noticed the ripple effect of her words among the audience. Faces softened, nods of solidarity emerged, and people leaned forward, emboldened by her courage. "Do you truly understand the implications of your actions?" she pressed, invigorated by the resonance of her own voice. "How can you stand in this space and not acknowledge the privilege you wield? This is not just law. It is the ethical obligation to uplift those without a voice." Blake's retort came in a calm, collected manner, but Ava knew better than to mistake it for confidence. "Equality is a two-sided coin, Ava. You speak of privilege, yet I wonder how much of it is merely part of your narrative versus our reality." His words dripped with condescension, aiming to undermine her message, twisting the dialogue into familiar terrain that favored his authority. "You don't get to redefine the narrative," she shot back, feeling the wave of adrenaline course through her. This was no longer just about proving him wrong. It was a fight to redefine the dialogue entirely. "Our stories are intertwined. It is time you acknowledge that those stories have value beyond your understanding." As the discussion continued, Ava's defenses sharpened with each question, each challenge. The edge she had cultivated was tempered with the empathetic impulse that had propelled her to this role. It wasn't about dismantling Blake. It was about asserting that justice must have a face representative of the people it serves. She discovered clarity in that notion, the foundation of her mission coalescing into a strong pillar within her. But doubts still snaked their way into her mind. Did any of this matter? Could one panel, one argument shift the machinations of the judicial system? The pressure of expectation weighed on her, intensifying the already fragile remnants of uncertainty. Yet, with every question she fielded, every assertion she made, she felt a deeper connection to the countless individuals who inspired her fight. Each face she had envisioned became a silent ally, urging her forward with encouragement. Minutes felt like hours, and for every answer she provided, another volley from Blake emerged, trying to push her into a corner. The tension escalated into a dance of intellectual maneuvers, but now she sensed herself thriving amidst the discord. The audience was engaged, and their reactions illuminated the truth that she stringently articulated. Their struggles mirrored her own. But as the panel drew to its peak, Ava could feel an inevitable precipice forming beneath her. Would she remain fortified, or would the impending backlash bring her crashing down? There was no turning back now. Taking a calculated breath, she set her gaze on Blake, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The moment for transformation had arrived, and its ripples were about to extend far beyond this auditorium. "Ava," Blake said once more, an unmasked challenge flaring in his eyes, "are you prepared to face the consequences of speaking your truth?" The weight of his question loomed over the room, a tension that could spark a revolution or shatter her resolve. Ava leveled her chin, realizing that the path ahead, filled with uncertainty, was also brimming with potential. She would answer him, not just for herself, but for all who dared to demand justice. And with that thought resonating powerfully within her, she imparted an unwavering spirit as she prepared to respond. The path to authenticity wasn't merely about standing her ground. It was about embracing who she was becoming. It was time for Ava to challenge not just Blake, but the very system he represented. Ava took a deep breath, her heart pounding, as she sifted through the weight of Blake's challenge. Every gaze in the room felt like a spotlight, illuminating her commitment and the shaky ground she had long stood upon. This was not simply about winning an argument. It was the unveiling of her growing identity as a leader capable of initiating change. "Ava," she began, her voice steady, embodying resilience, "consequences are the bedrock of accountability." She felt a swell of confidence at her declaration, a subtle reminder that she wasn't alone in this. "You bet I am prepared to face them because I know that my actions today can reverberate into the future. This is a mandate I embrace, not just for myself, but for every voice that has gone unheard." As she spoke, she noticed subtle shifts in the audience's demeanor. The tension around her lightened just slightly as they began to see her not just as an adversary to Blake, but as a champion for a cause that connected them all. It was empowering, exhilarating, and fraught with responsibility. "I'm not here to play a zero-sum game, Blake. I don't want to take anything away from you, but I will fight to ensure that my perspective, our perspective, holds a place in this narrative." Her words rippled out like a promise, and she felt the thrumming energy of hope vibrating in the space around her. Blake's facade cracked ever so slightly, irritation flitting across his features. "And yet you position yourself as the sole arbiter of truth, Ava. Bold, indeed." His voice held an edge, an attempt to isolate her, to regress her into defensiveness. She leaned in, closing the gap that he had tried to create. "No, Blake, the truth is collective, and you've dismissed the contributions of many for too long. This isn't about diminishing your perspective. It's about amplifying those who are often overshadowed by it." The applause that followed surprised her. It caught her off guard, wrapping around her like a warm blanket of affirmation. In the midst of her passion, the unexpected support from the audience felt like a validation of the journey she had undertaken, the transformation she had embraced. It reinforced the nascent leader within her and ignited a fire that she, until now, hadn't recognized. But another thought intruded uninvited. Was this the end of her struggle, or just the beginning? The panel continued, and the questions turned sharper, their curiosity morphing into contention. Blake's attempts to switch the narrative only seemed to elevate Ava. Every tension-filled exchange became a rehearsal, a test that honed her resolve rather than breaking it. She learned to anticipate his maneuverings, to navigate his interruptions smoothly, even redirecting them as teaching moments. Yet as she stood firm, her mind raced with the potential fallout. What would Blake do next? What repercussions lay in the wake of her revelations? Questions gnawed at her, but for now she resolved not to let fear define this moment. Each thoughtful response was another step toward crystal clarity in her mission for justice. As the panel drew to a close, the moderator's voice rang out, "Ava, do you feel that you've shifted the narrative today?" Ava paused, considering her answer carefully. Would this truly be a lasting change, or would it be swallowed up in the politics of the system? She took a moment to gather herself. Today is just a step. Every voice that joins in this conversation makes it louder. I don't seek a career built on convenience. I want a legacy that challenges the status quo. I want to confront the truth and instigate real change, however daunting that may be. The applause that erupted was different this time, invigorating, promising. Yet, as she allowed herself to bask briefly in this triumph, an unsettling thought crossed her mind. If she was truly stepping into her role as a leader, what battles lay ahead? As the panel concluded, the moderator of the discussion mentioned the repercussions faced by leaders who challenged the norm. Blake's gaze bore into her, darkened by newfound respect, or perhaps distrust, as if realizing she could no longer be marginalized. Ava dared to ponder within herself. If she put her truth into action, what would be the ripple effect on her personal life? Confident yet uncertain of the future, she left the stage with more questions than answers, but a fiery resolve ignited deep within her. A new journey was unfolding, one that promised growth, conflict, and ultimately, transformation. And as she took her first steps away from the podium, she knew the time had come to face not just Blake, but the legacy she was destined to create. The ultimate confrontation had yet to come. Ava stepped off the stage, and the applause faded into a whispering echo, yet her heart still thudded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the risk she had taken. As she moved through the crowd, she felt a mix of adrenaline and doubt. The high of her moment still grappled with uncertainty about the repercussions that loomed on the horizon. The audience, who once felt like distant silhouettes, now felt closer, their eyes reflecting curiosity and hope. In the days following the panel, Ava found herself replaying the experience. Each confrontation with Blake had intensified her focus and sharpened her clarity of purpose, but it also left her wrestling with an unsettling truth. Standing up came with a cost. The emails from colleagues filled her inbox, some praising her courage, others questioning her motives. Words like ambitious were an ambiguous double-edged sword, enticing yet threatening. Alone in her office, surrounded by well-ordered chaos, papers stacked precariously on one another, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling beside her, she reflected on what needed to come next. Part of her wanted to bask in her triumph, to relish in the applause, but another part insisted on the hard realities of being an emerging leader. Picking up her pen, she drafted an outline for her next proposal. This was not just a response to the panel, but a blueprint for change, a manifesto of sorts. The energy that had coursed through her on the stage now fueled her determination to gather the scattered voices she had spoken for, those who had felt disregarded, perhaps even fearful of what her confrontation would mean for their own safety. But doubt crept in. What if they didn't want this change she was advocating? What if they preferred the comfort of the existing order, however flawed it might be? This internal conflict had sharpened into a clear dilemma. How to lead when her vision might not resonate with everyone's desires? As if sensing her turmoil, her assistant knocked lightly before entering, bringing with her a file filled with feedback from the panel discussion. "Ava, you might want to see this," she said quietly, her tone reflecting both concern and admiration. Flipping through the comments, Ava felt her resolve strengthen. Many shared her sentiment, echoing her desire for transformation, while others raised serious concerns about the path forward. One particular email struck her, an anonymous note that resonated deeply. "We need to uplift each other, not tear each other down. Are you sure you can handle the weight of that responsibility?" This honest question lingered. Standing up had made her feel stronger, more powerful, but also more isolated. What if her push for progress resulted in her alienating those she sought to inspire? With a newfound focus, she decided it was vital to retain connections as she moved forward. She plotted a strategy that involved outreach, where she could not only propose her ideas, but also listen to the community she sought to represent. Over the next few weeks, Ava reached out. Invitations for coffee, casual lunches, forums to discuss the changes she envisioned. Each meeting brought new insights, crafting her into a multifaceted leader rather than just an outspoken advocate. But as Ava expanded her influence, Blake was not idle. Whispered conversations echoed through the hallways, discussions about rumors of his retaliation and speculation about his next moves. She had redefined the battleground, and every new ally drew unwelcome attention. One evening, as she poured herself a cup of tea while staring out her office window into the dusky horizon, Dread coalesced in the pit of her stomach. The looming shadow of a confrontation she suspected was fast approaching became undeniable. It wasn't just about her aspirations anymore, it was becoming personal, and she needed to brace herself for the coming storm. One thought resonated clearly through her mind. The ultimate confrontation awaited, one that was not only external, but also an introspective struggle between her ideals and the unforgiving realities of leadership. With a steady breath, Ava prepared herself to face whatever was coming next, her strength fortified by each connection she had nurtured. The time had come to confront not just Blake, but the heart of the legacy she was striving to build, and she resolved to meet that challenge head-on. But as she steeled herself for the fight, an unexpected knock on her door shifted her focus, piquing her curiosity. What awaited her on the other side would change everything once more. The door creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped inside. It was Mara, a lawyer with a reputation for her sharp intellect and unwavering moral compass. The moment Ava saw her, a rush of anxiety melded with relief. Mara had always been a guiding light, someone who challenged Ava to think beyond her immediate instincts. "Ava, we need to talk," Mara said, closing the door behind her with a decisive click. Her expression was serious, and it immediately set off alarm bells in Ava's mind. "I heard about your confrontation with Blake." Ava nodded but didn't speak. The previous recognition of her courage felt fleeting as she grappled with the implications of that interaction. Was it bravery or hubris that had pushed her towards that public tussle? "I can't help but wonder," Mara continued, sliding into the chair across from Ava, "what you're planning next. It sounds like you've rallied some support." "It's more than support, Mara. I've got a plan, a real proposal to implement changes that benefit everyone," Ava replied, her voice trembling with a blend of passion and uncertainty. Mara leaned in. "And have you considered the backlash? Not just from Blake, but the others who might feel threatened by your changes? Leadership isn't just about vision, it's about navigating resistance." The weight of those words settled heavily on Ava. Leadership had seemed so clear-cut from her vantage point on the stage, but here in the intimate space of her office, she recognized the complexity. "I didn't expect everyone to be on board. I thought maybe I could bring them along. And what if they don't want to follow? Are you ready to face that? To confront those who might choose to align with Blake instead?" Mara's eyes locked onto Ava's, searching for resolve. The thought clawed at Ava's heart. She had envisioned a collaborative push towards change, but the reality teetered on the edge of fracture. It was more than leading. It was about influencing a culture resistant to disruption. "I have to believe that most people want to uplift one another," Ava responded, though doubt crept into her conviction. "Maybe they're just scared of the unknown." Mara shook her head slightly, the motion gentle yet firm. "Acknowledging fear is important, but relying on it won't change the status quo. Your vision is ambitious, yes, but it could also inadvertently dismiss the very fears you wish to address." Ava felt an internal fracturing. Each connection she had fostered now felt precarious. Every conversation she had opened a door not just for opportunity, but potential loss as well. "What if I fail? What if my vision isolates them rather than unites?" Mara's voice softened. "You've already made strides, Ava. Embrace the possibilities, but also be prepared for the cost of leadership. True leaders often face opposition. It's about how you adapt that defines your impact." Suddenly, the gravity of her journey crystallized in her mind. This was about more than just confrontation with Blake. It was about crafting her legacy amidst the push and pull of varying interests. She couldn't just be the sole voice advocating for change. She needed to cultivate a dialogue, one that really understood and addressed individual concerns while driving progress. With renewed clarity, she reached for her notepad, her fingers poised above the page. "I need to create a space for that dialogue, a platform where everyone feels heard, but also where I can offer actionable steps. Now you're thinking, Mara encouraged, a small smile breaking through her serious demeanor. This isn't just about you pushing a proposal. It's about facilitating meaningful discussion, understanding each person's position and building bridges. But you'll need to brace for the possible fallout that may follow. As they mapped out the framework for a community forum, Ava felt the unyielding tension in the air transform into a pulse of opportunity. Yet the sense of impending conflict loomed larger than ever, urging her to prepare internally as well as strategically. Just then, Mara's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at it, her expression shifting rapidly from engaged to startled. "Ava, listen to this," she said, handing her the phone. It was a news alert about Blake's next move, a public statement aimed directly at her. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She could sense the razor edge of confrontation drawing nearer, marking a point of no return. In sharing her voice, she had inevitably become a target. "Looks like your moment of truth is arriving sooner than you thought," Mara said, a note of urgency coloring her tone. With determination filling her veins, Ava steeled herself for what was to come. The battle lines were drawn, but she was ready to navigate the storm, self-aware but unwavering. Deep down, Ava understood that this was just the beginning. Decisions she made now would shape not only her future, but also the legacy she envisioned. And yet, one ominous question hung in the air. Would this fight solidify her role as a leader, or would it unravel the very fabric of her network? The next morning, Ava awoke with a sense of purpose invigorating her spirit. The sun streamed through her window, casting light on the notes and plans scattered across her desk, a chaotic tapestry of dreams woven through struggle and strength. Today was the day she would confront Blake head-on, not only in the courtroom but in the court of public opinion that he dominated. She took a moment to reflect on the whirlwind of the past few weeks. The panel discussion had been a pivotal event, one where she had employed her newfound confidence to redefine her narrative. Surrounding herself with supportive voices reinforced her belief that the fight was worthwhile. Yet Blake's recent public statement, draped in condescension and aimed at discrediting her ideals, echoed ominously in her mind. With unwavering resolve, Ava donned her robe, feeling the weight of her duties settle on her shoulders. This wasn't a mere garment. It was an emblem of authority, responsibility, and hope. Today, she would transform the critique into a clarion call for change. As she entered the courtroom, a sense of solidarity enveloped her. Each set of eyes, filled with support and expectation, fueled her fire. Throughout the proceedings, Ava navigated her duties with precision and poise. She watched Blake's antics and dismissals with a steady gaze, determined not to let him derail her focus. Under the guise of a calculated defense, Blake attempted to shift the narrative, staking his ground with clever yet empty rhetoric. But in the face of his bravado, Ava felt something shift within. A solidifying confidence built upon advocacy for herself and others. As the court session closed, Ava turned the weight of her situation into a powerful moment, addressing the assembled audience. "Justice cannot thrive in shadows," she began, her voice resonating with clarity and strength. "It cannot endure when voices go unheard. Today I take a stand, not just for myself, but for every individual disenfranchised by a system that often elevates privilege over merit." Each word was deliberate, crafted from the lessons she had learned through her struggles and discussions. The gasps from the audience indicated her sentiments hit deeper than expected, a testament to the power of her growth. Rather than tearing each other down, we must unite to examine the structures that hinder true equity. I invite each of you to participate in dialogue, to collectively envision a judiciary that echoes the voices of all. The room buzzed with unease and intrigue, leaving Ava acutely aware of the shift in tide. For the first time, she didn't cower in Blake's shadow. She rose to assert her authority. Her proposal for a community forum became tangible as she outlined actionable steps and invited participation, promising to create a space where courage intersected with truth. In the subsequent days, responses flooded in. Support from colleagues inspired a powerful network of allies dedicated to change. Together, they rallied, crafting the framework for Ava's vision, establishing protocols to ensure every voice would be heard. On the day of the community forum, the venue brimmed with energy, a kaleidoscope of perspectives and passionate voices converging. Attendees from all walks of life gathered to discuss the complex themes Ava had articulated. As she walked in, the applause and words of encouragement enveloped her, filling her with gratitude for the community she had inspired. Ava facilitated discussions, ensuring that the room breathed with the resonance of every participant. She answered tough questions, acknowledged fears, and ignited a flame of hope among those who had felt silenced. Blake's attempts to thwart her efforts faded into oblivion, overshadowed by a movement initiated not by a single voice, but by a chorus demanding change. Eventually, she garnered attention. Local news followed the developments, and with each report, Ava's recognition solidified. Her approaching path, thus, morphed into a definitive acknowledgement of her capabilities. She had proven herself capable of leading with clarity amid adversity. As the transformative reality of the forum sunk in, Ava felt the solidity of her identity take shape. "You need to stand for truth," her grandmother had always said, and now Ava understood the gravity of those words. She was not merely a judge. She was a leader, driving change, motivated by courage and conviction. In the final reflection of the transformative journey she had embraced, Ava penned her thoughts in a journal, sealing her commitment to a legacy defined by resilience and empowerment. She had faced down doubt, confronted privilege, and crafted a path. Each battle had honed her voice, and through every moment of uncertainty she had emerged fortified. Ava closed the journal, gazing out at the horizon, knowing her story was far from over. But today she had achieved more than a courtroom victory. She had laid the groundwork for an ongoing quest for justice and equity, and earned the place she deserved within it. This was her affirmation, a legacy set in motion, sculpted by perseverance, and fueled by an unwavering spirit that would continue to rise, unyielding. Now is the time. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. You need to subscribe now to stay with us on this journey of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help more stories reach those who need to hear them. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this riveting conclusion, and don't forget to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering journey. Don't wait even one more second to support real overcoming stories and the change they can inspire.